rules, even when they're unconscious. Heidegger's other example, the simple again, he tells the students, when you come into the classroom, you use the door, you turn the doorknob, you avoid the benches, but that's all so familiar to you that you don't have to think about it or be aware of it or pay any attention to it at all. Of course, you have to take account of it. Somehow your brain has been wired through by the doors and the doorknobs and stuff so that you just do it. But in your experience, that you don't have to take any account of it consciously, and you don't have to take, and your brain doesn't have to take account of it unconsciously. That's thinking as if you were still thinking how to do it. Your brain is wired so that when you get, the door is, Heidegger says at one point, you experience the door not as a door, but the two go out. And when you're in the familiar room, you experience the benches as to avoid or to sit on, and that's just direct. They just draw you that way. Yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to just talk about now.
Wait, no, I want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
And take the door and the doorknob, for instance, because it's important to say, and if anything goes wrong, you get into this Cartesian mode. So if the doorknob sticks, then there's you paying attention to the doorknob, trying to figure out what to do about it, and you do seem like a conscious subject with an ego who's got rules for dealing with doorknobs and is appealing to them. But that just shows that all the stuff that you may have had to learn is still there and comes out to help you in breakdown cases. But, and this is the big Heidegger point, you don't want to read the breakdown cases back into the normal coping cases as something you're either dimly aware of or something you're not even aware of but you're unconsciously doing. They're gone.
Can you talk about how this applies to learning how to drive a car?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so when I drive my stick shift Karmann Ghia, you want to know how it feels to drive a car. Well,
first how you learn to
yeah,
drive a car,
okay,
how it changes from what you're doing.
Yeah, when you start to learn, so let's do this with driving a car, and so I'll describe my car, which is an old stick shift car, and what do I do? Well, for one thing, I have no awareness of what I do. But let's start, when I learned to do it, I had to say, push on the clutch, then shift into second gear, then let up the clutch, and also in the meantime, to step on the gas. It's amazing anybody can learn to do even that sort of complicated thing, and you have to do it at exactly the right moment. And if you're on an uphill, which is typical of Berkeley, it's terrifying because you start coasting backward if you don't step on the gas soon enough, and it stalls. Teaching my kids to drive the Karmann Ghia. It was really scary for them and for me. Okay, so you learn this complicated bunch of rules, and you learn to listen to things like the motor is turning too fast, you better shift to a higher gear, or the sound of the motor racing, you better shift to a Anyway, the motor's straining, you better shift to a lower gear. You know what that sounds like, finally. The motor is straining, you better shift to a higher gear. You know what that sounds like. And finally, all that stuff gets into your brain in terms of whatever the neural networks do, the weights on the connections between the neurons, finally. That's what people think. And what happens, and how do you experience it? What's the phenomenology, to talk in the philosophy jargon? Well, the phenomenology of me driving the Ghia, as opposed to my kids learning, is I have no idea what I'm doing. While I'm carrying on a conversation about philosophy, my foot goes on the clutch, my foot goes off the clutch, my foot goes on the gas, off the gas, my hand grabs the stick shift and moves it into the right gear, and all of that happens utterly invisibly. People sometimes say automatically, but I don't want to say that because that makes it sound too rigid. It's sort of the way you sort of automatically switch the light switch when you come into the room, and it's so automatic that even when the electricity has gone off, your arm goes up and switches the light switch. I always find that fascinating when there is no light going to go on. But anyway, that's automatic. But this is not automatic because it's too flexible. I mean, on each hill, you do it differently. When the cars got loaded with people, it was particularly a little car like a Ghia, if you put 2 people in it, you have to do it all differently. That is, and on a hill with 2 people in it, it's really, you're back to like a beginner. What am I trying to explain? Oh yeah, you start by learning the rules and learning the sounds that go with the rules, and you end by doing it just amazingly invisibly. I mean, the idea that my foot is carefully doing things with the clutch, I have no clue.
Now a lot of, people, it might have sounded like this is purely an academic conversation, but then suddenly when you started reading this, you had all these people who were predicting that computers would be able to think and do what humans did, and you were able to use this philosophy to prove them wrong. Can you tell a little bit of that story?
Yeah, that is certainly one of the most amazing things in my life. Now I see in retrospect that just when I was reading this Merleau-Ponty and Heidegger critique of the whole idea of conscious and unconscious rule following and conscious and unconscious, what they call symbolic representations of the world. That is, descriptions of the world that are in your mind or in your brain. When I was reading and believing the devastating criticism of it, which is funny because the devastating criticism of it is simply really look and describe what you're doing when you're, but it's hard to look and describe what you're doing when you're totally absorbed in something else. Like, I can't really describe what my foot was doing, and you can't really describe how you deal with the doorknob. For instance, there's so many things to talk about. Merleau-Ponty says that when you get up to go out the door, your hand is already at the doorknob. And that struck me for years as a completely incomprehensible and nutty thing to say. But now that there's high-speed videos, it's turned out to be the case that when somebody gets up to go out the door, their hand begins right then to take the shape of the doorknob. And there's this kind of and that kind of. And moreover, if you tell them to imagine that they're going out the door, their hand also begins to take the shape of the doorknob, but much more crudely and sort of generically instead of the real doorknob. So all of that was going, I knew all that. And now I went to MIT to be a professor, and this is this sort of weird thing in my life. There were these people in the AI lab, artificial intelligence lab, claiming that they had found the rules and the symbolic representations that would soon enable computers to be intelligent. And moreover, sort of laughing at the philosophy classes where they say, look, you philosophers have been trying to understand perception and action and skill and all that for 2,000 years and you've got nowhere. We already have a very important clue, and in another 8 to 10 years we'll have intelligent computers.
What year was this?
Well, this was I was there, I'd have to get the dates, but I came to MIT in 58, I think. And that was right at the beginning of AI. They had just named artificial intelligence, I think the year before at a famous meeting in Dartmouth that everyone talks about. And Minsky, the head of the AI lab, said at about 64, I think. When was 2001? Did you know?
I don't remember.
I don't either. Let's say 64, 65.
The Kubrick films? I think it was 67.
Ah, that was close. And Minsky said, the head of the AI lab, a very smart guy with an obvious PhD in computer science and had been a junior fellow at Harvard and so forth, he gave, it's in the publicity of 2001, that in a few years, I think he said in a generation, we'll have computers like HAL, who will be able to talk with you and psych you out and run the spaceship and all that. And of course, we have nothing like HAL now, 50 years later. And Minsky, to his credit, has lately said that artificial intelligence has been brain dead since it came up against what they call a common sense knowledge problem. We can talk about that later. And I even heard Minsky on NPR say that Dreyfus was, you didn't say Dreyfus was right, he hasn't gone that far, but they asked him what about Hubert Dreyfus, and he said, Dreyfus is alive and Dreyfus is smart. I mean, having said that I was hopelessly stupid, they even wrote whole papers about how stupid my Heideggerian, they said, Dreyfus doesn't know anything about programming. I have no clue. They're right about programming. How can he be telling us that we can't do this by reading these crazy German and French phenomenologists? But anyway,
this. Wait for these bells.
Okay.
This is getting good though. I like this.
It's amazing.
Bells. It's gonna be 10 bells, right?
I guess so.
Can I have some water?
I've got some here. You want some of this?
No, you keep your water. I'll get mine. There might be some in the fridge here, right? Is that everyone's personal, private stash of things?
It is. It shouldn't be. We shouldn't use it. But if you find a cup and there are cups around, I can pour you some of my water. There, I don't know, is that a clean cup sitting there or glass?
I'm not so concerned about it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there are no germs. It looks very clean to me. Okay. Okay.
Good. Getting exciting.
Okay.
Okay, so you're at MIT and these people have these predictions, and what made you think that they were wrong?
Okay, right. At MIT, they were saying, look, we know how the mind works. You philosophers have missed it. And what I thought, it took a while.
First, what did they think? How did they think the mind worked?
They said the mind, we have symbolic representations in our mind, that is, descriptions of the world, and we have rules for how to deal with the things that we've got descriptions of, and we're able to detect the features of things which define what they are, so that the world comes sort of with little atomic things like this is round and it's brown and it's hard, and you can get all that into the description of it, and then we can recognize those things, and we can make computers that recognize that it's round and brown and hard and have in them descriptions of things and have in them rules for acting, and then they'll be like HAL in 2001. They said, in their jargon, human beings and properly programmed computers are physical symbol systems, and there's no difference. And they took it over from philosophy. I mean, but you don't want to hear the names of the philosophers,
a little bit, yeah.
Okay, well, it's fascinating. They took over the concepts and actions are based on rules from Kant, who said that in the 1700s. They took over the fact that there are these isolated primitive properties of things, basic properties of things, from